Variant dungeons are a new type of content that we will be receiving in patch 6.2, and it is something that I have wanted for years to come to this game. So for those that don't know what they are, variant dungeons are going to be dungeons with variable difficulty options. The normal dungeon can be completed solo or with a party, and this is a more narrative experience with you having to choose a dungeon route, and depending on the route that you choose, you will get a different narrative, but you can replay the dungeon a few times to explore all of the options in there. The other two difficulties are referred to as the Criterion dungeons, and this one has a normal mode and a savage variant. These Criterion dungeons are what I want to talk about today. So the difference between the normal and the Criterion dungeon is that the base dungeon has all of these routes that you can explore, and it's also a lot easier. It's there for the story, is what I can take away from the info that we got. The Criterion dungeon, on the other hand, doesn't have these routes to explore and has what I assume is a more standard dungeon layout as we're used to from our dungeons that we currently have in the game. The difference between normal mode and savage then for these Criterion dungeons is that for normal mode you will have matchmaking enabled, and you will also be able to resurrect in the dungeon, although normal resurrections aren't available, but more on that later. Whereas in the savage version there is no matchmaking, no reses allowed. If you wipe, all enemies will also respawn, and if you take too long, enemies will also grow stronger. So some sort of an enrage timer essentially, and it will also be more difficult. Now, difficult or challenging 4-player content is something that I've wanted for a very long time. I don't think it's a secret that I play Final Fantasy XIV mainly for the raiding aspect of the game, but I'm also someone that enjoys playing with a smaller group of people most of the time. So I am such a big fan of the dungeons in Destiny 2, as those are essentially mini raid experiences made for 3 players, and I'm hoping that these Criterion dungeons will be something similar to that. It means I get to do some sort of challenging content, but I don't need to find 7 other people to do that with, because everyone has their own schedule, so it can be tricky to find time where everyone is available. Not only that, but I just prefer hanging out on voice chat in the smaller numbers, so it's a win-win in that regard. I know that floor 100 Heaven on High and floor 200 Palace of the Dead are kind of challenging light party content as well, but it's not quite the light party raid experience that I'm looking for, which Criterion dungeons might also not be that, but I think it will be a lot closer to that 4-player raid experience that I'm looking for than what Deep Dungeon is. The limited resurrection system is also something that I quite like, because I think reses in 14 are kind of OP in some cases. In casual content I'm fine with reses being available as much as they are, because I don't want to wipe in dungeons or in 24-man raids just because that one person keeps dying and eats all of the reses, for example. But when it comes down to savage, I really feel like my group has had so many clears that we really shouldn't have had, purely because we were able to go full zombie mode through the fight, and we just managed to clear it because we were overgearing the DPS check by a lot. So while it is kind of funny to clear in that manner, it just doesn't really feel right to me, which is also why I again like Destiny's system of handling reses. Every party member gets a res token and that's it. I like this because it limits the amount of reses that are available, and it also spreads the responsibility, because right now all of that falls to your healers and maybe the red mage and the summoner if you have one of those in the party. But it also makes it so that red mage and summoner are the preferred casters in a lot of cases, because they provide that extra safety net in case your healers do end up dying, or in case they can't rest because they're out of mana or something. So this is why I like that they're going to be using a limited rest system for these Criterion dungeons. That way you don't really feel the need for a red mage or a summoner, and everyone can help out with resing in case your healer is the weak link of the party. We've already sort of experimented with something like this before with Blue Mage and Angel Whisper. This is a Blue Mage action that can resurrect a party member. Everyone in the party could take it, but it has a very long cooldown. So when you're doing the Blue Mage raid achievements, you want everyone in your party to take this, and I'm assuming that these limited res actions will function very similar to this. So quite like this. The fact that there are also 2 hard mode difficulties, I guess you could call it, is something that I also like. Assuming that the dungeons and their mechanics will be very similar, you can practice in the normal mode Criterion dungeon, where things are a bit easier and you have access to those reses, etc. And then once you feel comfortable with the dungeon, you can then move on to Savage, where you're punished a lot more for your mistakes. It's kind of how my raid group approaches the raids in Lost Ark as well. We do normal mode first for the raid, and then once we've gotten a bit more used to the mechanics, we try our hand at hard mode instead. So I'll probably be doing something similar for these Criterion dungeons as well. Overall, I'm pretty excited for this content, as it's something that I've just wanted for a very long time, and while we don't know what the reward structure will be, I'm just happy to be able to play this type of content. Now, of course, it's not here just yet, we don't know how it will play out in the end, but I'm feeling pretty good about it, and I just can't wait to try it out. So that's kind of everything that I wanted to say on these dungeons for now, and I'm sure that when they actually come out, or when we get more information on a later date, maybe during the live letter part 2, and I'll probably have another video ready for you guys as well. But let me know in the comments what you guys think about these dungeons so far. You excited to try your hand at Savage, or do you think you would probably stop at the normal mode Criterion dungeon instead? And how do you feel about the limited rest system and the fact that we're getting some challenging 4-player content that's not deep dungeon for once? Let me know down below. And with that, I want to thank you for watching, I want to thank my Patreons for their support, and I'll see you in the next one.